Welcome back to Bolts of Lights. Welcome to our Kingmaker tutorial. Play begins with whichever player is holding the office Chancellor of England. If Chancellor of England's not held, then instead it begins with the most senior bishop. Seniority goes Canterbury, York, Durham, Carlisle, Lincoln, Norwich, and so I can see quickly the orange player here has York. I think that's Bishop of Durham down here. No, Durham. York comes before Durham. So orange player is going to go first. Play is really easy. All you do is draw an event card. Then you get to move all your nobles and your ships. Then resolve any battles and sieges. This is when nobles have come into conflict. And then finally they draw a crown card. The event card is played face up and acted out. The crown card is played face down and kept in hand. The crown cards can be played at any time, on their turn, on another player's turn. So these could be adding nobles, adding offices, adding titles, adding mercenaries, ships, all the things that we learned about in part 1. Okay. Having a handful of face-down crown cards means you're making your opponents wary. They don't know what you're holding. They don't know if you could pull off a surprise attack, or maybe you're stronger in defense than you're making on, because you decide where those cards get allocated, which noble they go to. All right, let's start with an event card draw. So let's see, what has orange drawn? They've drawn a plague in London. Wow. Kingmaker is pretty ahead of its time, really, because these are dual-use cards. When you're drawing an event, you're looking at this part in the top right, in the bottom left. This part is instead used to resolve battles. These are like battle results. So you'll draw a card depending on what you're trying to use it for. We're doing events, so we look at plague in London. Plague cards are one of the biggest threats in Kingmaker. Any nobles that are in London are affected by the plague. As it goes, we just have a royal piece there, no nobles. However, plague does also kill royal pieces. Henry, King of England, is killed. Ships are not affected by the plague. Their passengers are, so nobles on board ship are affected. But suddenly the dynamic of the game has changed. King Henry is gone. There is no king. This event deck really changes up the game. You might say, well, it's a bit random. Well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't, because there's only 17 plague cards. The same town is not going to get hit twice. Some towns are not going to get hit at all. Calais, for example, is a safe place from plague. We know now London's come out. London's not going to get hit by plague again. So, and this is one of the dynamics of the game, that towns become, and cities become, kind of risky places to be until their plague cards come out. You want your nobles in towns because they're safer there. They can protect 400 troops. They have a garrison of 200, cities of 300, but there's a risk of plague. Now London's come out. London becomes safe, although, of course, there's no longer a king residing there. There's less of an incentive to head to London. But controlling London is also important, as we'll see in the next phase, because many roads lead through London. We'll talk about that in a bit. All right, so we've conducted the plague of London. If a noble was there, any titles and offices related to that noble are placed in the chancery. So face down in the chancery. Remember, there's a parliament phase where you can reclaim cards in the chancery and assign them to your nobles. Other cards, including the noble itself, go back on the bottom of the crown deck. Why don't we have a quick look at some of the other types of events that may occur. First off, storms at sea. Pretty easy. Remember, everything in the top right is your event, bottom left is used during battles. We'll look at that in a bit. So storms at sea. Ships can be out at sea sailing. Ships will have to take, and this is affect everyone. So when you pull an event, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting everybody. So ships have to take refuge in the nearest port. They're forced back to the nearest port. Pulling nobles, pulling ships from place to place involuntarily during the event phase is what keeps the game dynamic and keeps the game unpredictable, and means you have to prepare, you have to have strength in depth in order to succeed. Raids and revolts. We've got a peasant revolt here, we've got a French raid here. All the nobles named, so here the Warden of the Cinque Ports, here Mowbray, and the Marshal of England. So they could be named by title, by office, individual nobles. they have to immediately go to the place named. So again, you think you've got your nobles stacked up, holed up in a secure defensive position, and then suddenly a raid or revolt pulls your noble to somewhere at a distance, often back to your home castle or to a location associated with the office. Some offices, some nobles are more vulnerable to these raids and revolts than others, and again, you'll get to know. So there is depth to the game as you get to know the game. But yeah, this is key. All right, be ready to pounce when these events happen, because it may pull a noble into a vulnerable position where he can be attacked by an enemy, and they may be pulling royal pieces with them. Of course, if they choose to leave the royal piece behind, they can do, but then that royal piece will need to be recaptured. Sometimes you might get pulled to a place that you're not allowed to go. Maybe you don't control. Maybe Mowbray has to go to Framlingham, but doesn't control Framlingham. It's controlled by an enemy, in which case they're placed in the field next to that location instead. So, for example, let's say we pull this peasant revolt, and it says Courtney to Okehampton, Holland to Compton. Holland to Compton. Holland is up here in Kimbolton. Compton is down here. But let's say that Courtney's gone in here and taken control of Compton. Holland then has to come in to Compton, but can't occupy the castle. So what do they do instead? They go in the field outside. So we place them in the space next to, and if there's not enough space, you can place it on top. This is where the control counters help. What I like to do is if the noble is inside the fortification, then put the control marker on top. If they're outside in the field, put the control marker underneath like this. So this would be a unit in the field. I mean, there's space enough in here, in this square here, to place the noble outside. But Courtney is inside the castle, and Holland is outside in the field. Okay. Now, as it goes, it's perfectly fine for enemy factions to occupy the same square, occupy or pass through. All right, we'll talk about road movement in a minute, but occupied castles block roads, but not the open field. But you can see how it changes up the dynamics. Now, potentially, Holland is in position to attack Courtney in the castle. If both units were out here in the field, then a battle would ensue. You can't have two enemy units in the field at the end of the turn. This is when a battle occurs. All right, but at the moment, Courtney's tucked inside the castle, no battle. So that's raids and revolts. They're pushing nobles around the map, either by name or by office and title. Okay. Next, we have an embassy event. This calls a soul named king. We don't have one. Henry has been killed by plague, but this one says there's an embassy from King of France. The king has to move to Rye. So if Henry were still safely tucked up in London, this event comes out. Now Henry is pulled to Rye, he becomes vulnerable. See, these events really change things up. So that's an embassy. It moves a crowned king, a sole crowned king. If the king were controlled by a noble, then that noble can choose to come with them. So, if Courtney was controlling Henry, then up in London, when the king is called, Courtney can come with them. Next up, Parliament. This is one of those event cards that actually changed a little in the aerial version that we're playing. If this event card is drawn by the player holding Chancellor of England, they get to take this card and keep it. If it's drawn by any other player, it's simply discarded for no effect. But if Orange were holding Chancellor of England, they'll take this card now, place it in their play area. The event cards are kept face up. And what that means is at the end of their turn, if there's no sole crowned king, there isn't right now, there's no king, then they can call Parliament. If there's two crowned kings, they can use this card to call Parliament. We'll see that in a bit. Right, so that's the Parliament card. Drawn by any other player. If Chancellor's not in play, which he's not right now, or Chancellor was one of the other players, this card is just discarded. Now that's changed in the latest rules of Kingmaker, so the new release. When this card is drawn, if the Chancellor is in play, even if you drew it and you're not Chancellor, you give that to the Chancellor. So if orange player drew this, green holds the Chancellor, they have to give this event card to the green player. Okay. So what that means is in the new version of Kingmaker, Parliament and the role of the Chancellor becomes more active. In the older versions of the game we're playing, this is the type of thing that comes up a little more rarely. There's only 4 of these in the deck. In fact, in the new version, there's 5 of these cards. So even more likely to come up. In fact, well, maybe not, because the deck's actually thicker. I think it's we've got 80 event cards. The new, I think, is 99. We'll have to look. I'll show you when we get there. But in aerial version of the game, if you draw this and you're not Chancellor, or the Chancellor's not in play, just discard it. Okay, writ of summons to Parliament. If you draw this card, keep it. You're going to need to use these cards to call people to Parliament. So if you call Parliament, if you control the sole crowned king or the Chancellor and you call Parliament, for every writ card you hold, you play, discard, you can call another noble to Parliament. And again, it's another way of getting little nobles out of their hidey holes. Now, there are some exceptions. So on raids and revolts, for example, if a noble's at sea on ship, they can ignore a call from a raid or revolt. If a noble is under siege, they can ignore a raid or revolt. They can stay where they are. And there are some places that are considered safe. So if a noble is in Calais, then this is considered a safe space. You're protected from raids and revolts. But in the aerial version of the game, at least, a writ can still be served to a player in Calais. There's some other overseas places that also means you don't have to respond to a raid or revolt. Carisbrooke, Beaumaris here on Anglesey, and Douglas up here, the Isle of Man. So these are places that are over a sea border. You're immune to raids and revolts. If you're on a ship, again, you're out at sea. Actually, if you're a noble on a ship in port, so if you're here on board ship in port, that's not far enough. You're still going to have to respond to a raid or revolt. With a writ, however, being summoned to Parliament, those things don't protect you. And that has changed, like I say, in the new game. We'll see that when we get there. All right, so Parliament and writs, those are the ways that you can control and you can get nobles out of these little hidey holes. They think they've got a strong defensive position. Well, you call Parliament, you pull them away and make them vulnerable. And then lastly, free move. So if you pull this, you get to retain it. And then during the movement phase, which is coming next, straight after events, you get to move your pieces. All your nobles can move just once, but with a free move card, you can move 1 piece. Now this is important. During the last part, I'd mentioned that having control of a royal piece can slow you down. So let's say we had a noble here who's controlling Henry VI. I've moved. I'm desperate to get to London. I can use a free move to get there. But unfortunately, it's only 1 piece. I'm going to need 2 of these cards to move Henry with me. Okay? Which is fine. You can collect these and stack them up. So once you've got 2 free moves, so to get the noble here with Henry, that's 2 pieces. You'd need 2 free move cards. All right. I'll show you how movement happens in a bit. That's free move. Right, so that's the events that you can face. And you can see these are the things that set up the turn ahead and can potentially put a noble in a vulnerable or a royal piece in a vulnerable position. Right, once you've drawn your events, we drew Plague in London, remember? And Henry got killed. We move to the movement phase, and that's when we're orange player, we get to move our nobles. Let's give this event deck a bit of a shuffle back up. You can move your nobles in any order you wish. Each noble can only move once. Each ship can move just once. So it's not just nobles, you're moving your ships as well. So orange player has a ship in Berwick. We could potentially move that down. Movement is 5 spaces. So whether you're moving a noble over land or moving a ship at sea, it's 5 spaces. So let's say we wanted to move the Berwick, which is all the way up north to the southeast of Edinburgh. We can move the ship 5 spaces. Okay, we can't go around the top here. This is blocked, so you can't go around the top of Scotland, but this is a space. Now moving out of port is 1, so moving into this space is 1. And then this is a whole big space. We can move 2, 3, and continue further south if we wished. 4, and moving into port is also a movement. So if we wanted to move into Kingston here, that would be 5. Now we can carry troops with us, or a noble with us in all their entourage, but embarkation and disembarkation, getting onto and off the ship, that noble can't have moved. All right, so if we wanted to move, say, Grey here, we've got our noble Grey. So Grey can move up to 5 spaces, so they could move into Berwick, right, which is just 2 spaces away. They have to go into the field because Berwick is controlled by another faction. It's got a green faction control marker on it. We couldn't then embark onto the ship and have the ship set sail. We'd have to stop here, and then next turn we can have the ship sail with Grey and his entourage on board. We've got Percy here at Cockermouth, so he could move up as well. Now movement is square to square. I say it's 5 spaces, so they could move 1. You can move diagonally, so we could move, Percy could move 1, and then diagonally across here is just 2. Right. 3, 4. You can move through other places, you see, if you wish. 5, up here and stack with Grey at Chillingham. We could do that. Stacking your units together is a great way to build up a force. And let's say we wanted to capture Newcastle, which is controlled by the blue player. Incidentally, there's 2 Newcastles on the board. The blue player's got this town card. That's the town of Newcastle, which is up here, as opposed to the castle of Newcastle, which is southeast of Chester. But let's say we wanted to go and capture Newcastle. Newcastle's in reach, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. But although there's no noble there, it has a garrison of 200. In order to attack this town, this is called a siege, you must have a force equal to or greater than the garrison plus any troops that are protected by the fortification there. Okay, so if blue player had a noble here with some troops, then that would get added on to the garrison of 200. Now at the moment, Percy here in Cockermouth has 100, yeah, only has 100. Okay, only has 100 troops. That's not enough. Now he could assault a castle. Castles have only got a garrison of 100. But there is reason. Maybe we could go down and look at Massam here, which is occupied by Scrope. But Scrope's got 40 of his own, so that's 140 there. We've only got 100. Not enough. The only point really of controlling castles is that they block movement on roads. So let's have a look at movement on road. So we've looked at movement on sea, ships move on sea. We've looked at movement on land, you're counting 5 spaces. Incidentally, Kingmaker the second, the new release, I mentioned there's a new game with a flip side on the map. They've done away with movement of 5 individual squares, and instead they've grouped a number of squares into bigger regions, and you can instead move one region as a movement. It makes it so much easier, so much quicker, speeds up the game. Less granular, but I'll say the intent is to speed up the game. I can't wait to try that out. So let's see, what do you want to do? And as you're playing this game, when you're moving your units, particularly at the beginning, you're looking to see where can you group them up. Is there a town that you can get them into where they're a little bit safer? So for example, we could potentially say, well, let's try and head towards Carlisle. Let's try and group Percy and Grey together. We've got Lancaster as well, so maybe head down to Lancaster. We do control York. Remember, Grey is the Archbishop of York, so maybe we should be heading down to York. I'd love to be able to get down to York via this road. So movement by land, 5 squares. Movement by sea, 5 squares. The other option is movement by road. If your noble is standing on a space with a road, let's say we were in Carlisle, there's a road that runs. You can move the extent of this road as far as you want. If this went here, we could move all the way down to York. In fact, we could keep going. We could follow this road all the way around, maybe all the way to Chester. So if this road were open, we could move all the way to Chester, or even all the way down to London, because we can go into Shrewsbury and then keep going. But here's the problem. The road is blocked. If there's a castle, royal castle or town that's controlled by another player, it will block your movement on road. You can ask permission though. So I could say to the green player, come on, let me through. And they might say, okay, but you need to give me something in return. All right. So there's haggling to be had. No, castles and towns only block road movement, okay? Not field movement. You can pass through the field, okay? So Massa might be a nice target for me if it weren't occupied by Scrope. Yeah, if it weren't occupied by Scrope, then I would have this lovely road, or the orange player would have this lovely road that they could get around the map on. Now I must point out from Avalon Hill onwards, so if you're playing Avalon Hill, neutral fortifications also block. Right, so if we're playing aerial, neutral don't block. But every version since, neutral locations also blocked. So in order to open up this road, I'd have to control these castles as well. So this is why, and the only reason really why you want to control castles is to open up this road. So Appleby and Richmond would need to be opened up. It's up to you if you want to adopt that rule in your aerial game, but say the aerial second printing rule says only fortifications controlled by other factions block road movement. Interestingly, when Alan Paul developed Kingmaker 2nd, a new release with the zonal movements, he chose to go back to the aerial rule that neutral fortifications don't block road movement, but in the classic version, he's kept the Avalon Hill rule. Neutrals block roads. Okay, so if I wanted to move down here on this road, I could do, but I'd have to stop in the field outside. If you're playing Avalon Hill, I'd have to stop here at Appleby and yeah, but to be fair, it's quicker to just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Take the field rather than the road. So look out for those little differences. As it goes for now, I'm going to bring Grey over to Carlisle. We'll hole up in Carlisle, we're inside. Maybe then go to Lancaster. But right now, that's a much better force because the forces of Grey and Percy have united. So we've got 100 here, 180 units in a stack. And now on my next turn, I can move those as a stack together. A force of 180 can start to take down castles and control this road. Scroop better watch his back. I keep saying Scrope, sorry, it's just a stupid habit. It's Scroop, it's pronounced Scroop. One other quick thing to note is when you are moving over land like this through area movement, if you ever enter one of these forest spaces, you have to immediately stop. Okay, so to move through the forest here would just be one stop. Moving out like this is fine. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. But as soon as you move into a forest space, you have to stop. Herbert has a force of 60 plus 200 when in Wales. So 260 is a good force. So Herbert is my strongest, or orange player's strongest noble. So we could go in a sort of town, but what we want to do, Cardigan is an open town. 1, 2, we're going to head up here into Cardigan. No one can ever control an open town. Let's say there's 3 open towns, Cardigan, Hereford and Kingston. Hereford's here, Kingston's up here. You can't control it. So although we're standing here in Cardigan, we're not controlling Cardigan. No one can ever control one of these 3 open towns. But we do now control George of Clarence. Our noble has got George. We're allied with the Yorkists. We were first to move, first to get there. And this is why it's important to be first to move, because you can run in here. Ludlow might be thinking about it, but with 260 troops here, this is a strong noble. Courtney's down here in Oakhampton. There's not a lot of enemies around, but Courtney's only got 30 units. We could make our way up this way, but I think the best way is to bring the Berwick down and around, potentially, to pick up Courtney. Yeah, that might be a good plan. So let's bring the ship round the Berwick. 1 out of ports, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Berwick's in open sea without any passengers. heading round to a port, something like Dartmouth or Plymouth. That's it, everyone's moved. Now if you want to, you can put these little tokens on to say who's moved and who hasn't. I kind of like to do that. But once we're done, at this point we're looking for battles. Are there any two nobles in the field together in the same square? No, they're not. Do we want to attack anybody? Do we have a noble in the field at a fortification that we could potentially attack or siege? No, we don't. Do we want to call Parliament? So at this point we could be using the Chancellor's Parliament cards, or if we have control of a sole king, do we want to call Parliament? Now, Orange player's got an archbishop and two bishops. We control a royal peace. We might be thinking about, is there somebody we control who is, remember, next in line of succession to be crowned? Now, Richard of York is currently top. Richard of York is in York, which we control. I need to be thinking about bringing these forces down and having a coronation happen. We're in a strong position, the Orange player. We've got George, but he's probably going to be sacrificial. Now, next in line to the Lancastrian throne is Margaret of Anjou, regent to Edward. So there's potentially a little bit of action, potentially for green player next in the middle here. All right, so we're thinking all the time, this is how the game plays. Oh, it's intriguing, there's lots of plotting, and I'm going to talk to you in a little bit about tradables and what sort of things you can trade between players. But let's finish out the turn. So we've done all our movement. We don't have any battles, sieges, parliaments, or coronations. The next thing we do is draw a crown card. So you draw the top card, and this one you're going to keep secret. We've drawn Constable of the Tower of London, 200 troops within 2 squares of London. Whew, that would have been good when Henry was here. You can play this any time, but we might just want to keep this in our hands. The opponents don't know what this is. All right, so we'll keep that in our back pocket for now. It could be that these guys up north here could pull out an extra 50 troops. So keep that face down. We don't have to assign it to anyone until we choose to. And that's it. We've ended our turn. The turn passes clockwise around the board, so green player will go next. They'll be drawing an event, doing their movement, and then drawing a crown card. So let's move down. Green player next. They've got 3 nobles, Scroop, Holland, and Talbot. And I've got a plan with Talbot. Let's see what happens. Event first. So draw the top card. It's a writ. Let's take the writ. So that just goes to their hand. Okay, face up. All players know now that there's a danger. If green player gets in a position to call Parliament, they could get a summons. Movement. Now Talbot has got 100 troops within 3 squares of Conway. 50 troops plus 100 plus 30. That's 230. If they move 1, 2, 3, 4 into the field of Harlech, we can do that. We can do that. Harlech is within 3 squares of Conway up here. 1, 2, 3. And Conway is our castle. We could run off there. Herbert's a risk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is a small border here into this space. We'll keep Scroop up here, blocking the road at Massam, and then Holland, I think we'll run over to Northampton. 1, 2, 2 spaces. Hold up here and see what happens. Hopefully you can see what's happening here. Towns that we control, we can freely enter. Okay, towns and castles. Locations that are neutral, not controlled by anyone, or controlled by enemies, we can't. Okay, we have to assault them, we have to attack and siege them. These little towns, they don't do anything. Okay, these are just here for the sake of their name. Right? They don't block movement or anything like that. It's only these fortifications. Okay, so we control Northampton. We can just wander in here and treat it as a town for protection, and we can make use of its garrison to defend our position. We want to attack Harlech now, over here. There's no battles, there's no field battles. They happen first, then we have to declare our intent to attack. And this is a siege because we're in the field attacking a fortification. Now these cards don't really work well together, but here's Talbot. he has 100 troops within 3 squares of Conway. So these are additional troops. There's about 5 of these cards to give additional or extra troops. We've got the Ship of Bristol. I should have moved my Ship of Bristol. Warden of the Northern Marches doesn't really work well with this one because this is the River Tees here that runs around south of Durham and Raby, up here north of Appleby. This is the River Tees, and then across this line below Cockermouth. So everything north of that is the Northern Marches. But where we are right now, we've got 150, 200 plus 30, and we've got the Michael, the Ship of Bristol, which we could have moved out of here if we wanted to. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't, to be honest. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why don't we bring it into the port of Conway? We can do that. Incidentally, that one should be here. So we're assaulting this castle. We've got 230 troops. There's no other noble here. If there were, we could be potentially playing crown cards, boosting our nobles alternately. But this is a royal castle. And the royal castle, it tells us at the key at the bottom, a royal castle has a garrison of 200. So we're 230 to 200 defenders, slightly ahead. Next thing we do is we draw an event card. A siege is always successful. If we've got enough troops to complete the siege, so equal or more, a siege is always successful unless we draw an event card that says bad weather delays attack. Okay, let's draw, see what happens. If we draw any free move or writs, we'll get to keep them and we draw again. If we draw bad weather delays, then the siege is unsuccessful. We end the turn, we move on. Okay. It's a free move, so green player takes this card. Let's draw again. And here we are, it's a victory. Okay. Now, there's some odds on here. You ignore them. You only use those if we're doing a field battle. And in this case, you have to outnumber the defending forces by 2 to 1 to have a victory. Yes, field battles are tough. I must say, all field battles and sieges are non-compulsory. Okay, forces of opposing factions can occupy the same space without going into conflict. It's up to the attacker to decide whether they want to or not. So there we go. We've got a victory. Now, there's still a chance there might be a problem because in this section, there's listed the names of 2 nobles, Herbert and Boucher. If either of those are involved, they're going to be killed. We're attacking with Talbot. Talbot's name's not here. If Talbot's name was here, given he's the only noble attacking, he'd be killed and the siege would be unsuccessful. Right? So there is a chance that the siege will be unsuccessful. We've avoided death. Herbert and Boucher are not involved. Talbot is safe. We've got our victory. We can now take control of Harlech. We can, in fact, we're inside the fortification now, and we have control of Edward, a royal peace. So let's just check. Yeah, so there's a plague. If we've drawn this plague, bad weather delays attack, then we have to sit here. We haven't gained control. Instead, this fortification is under siege. We'll have to wait for another turn, and any defenders there cannot move. So record the fact that these are under siege somehow. You'll remember. Any nobles here are now stuck there. They can't escape. And remember, nobles under siege does not respond to raids and revolts. Okay, let's shuffle that one back in. Now, Edward's not next in line of succession. Richard of York is. So Edward can't be crowned just yet, but we would be looking, if we had bishops and archbishops, and the next in line we'd be looking at a coronation. We don't. Let's move on. And green draws a crown card. All right, an extra company of crossbowmen. Like I say, you play those any time on your turn, and also As we just saw, if you were a noble in a fortification coming under attack, you've got an opportunity to play those mercenaries to your noble and kind of break the siege, if you like, if you then have more defenders than the attacker. Now, just before we finish for today, I will be back. I do have a little correction. So thank you to eagle-eyed viewers. There's an important rule when you're assigning offices. You cannot assign an office to a noble without a title. So this dirty little Herbert hasn't got a title. So I'm going to do a little cheat and just move Earl of Richmond over here. So actually, Herbert's a little bit stronger than I thought. But look out for that. Only titled nobles can hold office. Bishop, Archbishop, that's okay. That's not an office. Additionally, there is a rule. I missed it. It's not terribly clear in the second printing, but strangely it was clear in the first printing. And it's certainly clear now. No titled noble can hold more than one office. So Talbot down here can't be both Chancellor and Warden. So this Warden of the Marches should have gone somewhere else, really. So let's do a little switch, shall we? We'll have to give the Warden to Scroop. And I think we need to make up for those lost forces, don't we? So 50, 150, 180. We need to put some crossbowmen back over here. Right, then we're back where we should be. All right, so look out for it. One office, one title, one office has to be titled to hold an office. All right, so thanks for those watching. That's the way we should be. Now I'm going to stop the video here, and in part 3 we're going to look at a field battle, we're going to look at Parliament, we're going to look at alliances, and we should pretty much have the rules down. See you next time.